My son kicked the cane out of my hands. But I stood up, and with that cane, I wrote his end. It happened in my living room, the one I painted soft blue after his father died. Afternoon light made a quiet square on the rug. The cane clattered against the baseboard. "Mom, stop," he said, as if I were a toddler throwing a fit. Behind him, my daughter-in-law folded her arms and watched the way a nurse watches a difficult patient. On the coffee table, a neat stack of papers, a black pen, a business card from a memory clinic I'd never heard of. On the mantel, our family photo lay face down, as if it couldn't bear to see. "You're being dramatic," he added, nudging the pen toward me. "This is a plan. We'll sell the house before winter. The doctor agrees it's best. You won't have to worry anymore." "About what?" I asked. "About anything," my daughter-in-law said, sweet as cough syrup. "Bills, decisions, stairs. We've already put a deposit on the community. There's bingo on Thursdays. I picked up the top page. Durable power of attorney." The words sat there like teeth. "When did the doctor say I can't make decisions?" "He implied it," she said. "He said stress compromises judgment." "Judgment," I corrected. It was petty, but it steadied me. "And did he say I'm not allowed to read?" My son sighed the way he used to when I told him to wear a helmet. "Please don't make this harder. We're trying to help you. Sign, and we'll take care of everything." I looked at his shoes, expensive, new, and thought of the envelope of cash missing from the hall drawer, the forged signature on the insurance form I'd found and tucked away, the realtor's card I pulled from the trash with our address scrawled on the back. How could my own son look at me and see a problem to be solved, not the woman who kept him fed and warm through every fevered night? "Trust me," he said softly. "I'm your Ud." I bent, retrieved the cane, and stood without wobbling. His eyes flicked to my hand, surprised. "I do trust you," I said. "That's why this hurts." He didn't notice the small red light glowing in the bookshelf, or the neighbor waiting for my call, or the copies I'd made of every strange bill that crossed my mailbox. He didn't know I had already chosen the battlefield, time, paper, witnesses, and that I wasn't walking into it alone. Little did they know, I had been preparing for this day longer than they had. The first small theft happened on a Tuesday, the kind of day that forgets its own name. It was 3 months after Richard's funeral. I'd taken my wedding set off for the first time to wash the turkey pan and set them on a paper towel by the sink, the diamond fogged with grease, the band with its tiny dent from the time it was caught on the garden fence. The phone rang. I dried my hands, answered, and when I turned back, the paper towel was there, damp and empty. I remember staring at the blank square as if I could will the rings to reappear. Later, when I told my son, he said gently that grief makes people misplace things. He suggested a cleaner, a better jewelry box, a home alarm. He said all the right words, and I learned for the first time how a sentence can be as soft and suffocating as a pillow. He started stopping by more often after that, not with soup or flowers or a repairman, but with forms, bank beneficiary updates, a new cable package, a simplified insurance plan. "I'm just trying to help," he said, and I wanted to be the kind of woman who says yes to help, but help, if it is help, doesn't require you to look away while someone else signs your name. On Sunday dinners, he'd bring his wife. Andrea wore perfume that made the kitchen smell clean, even when it wasn't. She put coasters under water glasses and never ate bread. She called the casserole rustic, and my neighbor, Mrs. Ortiz, sweet. Once, after we'd cleared the plates, she stood by the window, watching the wind fuss with the maple, and said, "This is a lot of house for one person." The way she said person made me feel like a placeholder in my own chair. I saw the second theft in my mailbox, a credit card I hadn't applied for. The envelope had my name, my address, but inside, the card felt foreign, like a stranger's voice on my answering machine. I called the bank. "We spoke last week," the woman said politely. "You asked for this one because it has cash back on health expenses." I hadn't spoken to anyone. "Mrs. Keating," she said, "you gave security answers. Your mother's maiden name, your first pet, I'm looking at the recording. The recording wasn't me. The voice said my mother's name wrong. I froze my credit and told no one. It felt like pulling a blanket over my head during a storm, knowing the roof was the thing that mattered. Every grief tutor tells you not to make big decisions in the first year. I obeyed. I kept the routines that had kept me married. Mondays for sheets, Tuesdays for bills, Thursdays for the market, Sundays for roast chicken. I went to church and sat where Richard and I used to sit. Third row on the left, where the light makes everyone look touched and forgiven. People did the kindness all good people do to widows. They told me I was strong. I nodded and learned to hold my face steady as glass. The memory clinic entered my life through the back door. Andrea handed me a business card folded around a tea bag. "It's free," she said. "Just a baseline. Everyone should do it." Mid-City Cognitive Health. The font was tasteful, the address a building near the hospital where Richard had gone for his treatments. "Please," she added, and her voice made a soft bruise on the word. "If not for you, then for us." I went because I am a woman who believes in doctors. They put me in a small room with pale green walls and a clock that ticked a little too loud. A young man asked me to remember 3 words, apple, table, penny, and then told me to draw a clock face and make it say 10 past 11. He smiled when I finished. He didn't smile when I said apple, table, penny again after 10 minutes had passed. He made a note. On the way out, I saw Andrea in the hallway speaking to the receptionist with that co-conspirator tone women use in boutiques, half whisper, half smirk. "My mother-in-law is so independent," she said. "She exhausts herself." Exhaustion became a diagnosis that did not require a doctor. It excused every quiet insult, every decision made just slightly out of my reach. When the plumber came to replace the water heater, the invoice went to my son's email. When the car insurance renewed, the agent addressed him as primary. When I forgot to take the coupon for the stand mixer, a new mixer appeared, fancy and app-enabled. "We're modernizing things," my son said. "Making your life easier." He stroked my shoulder without looking at me, the way you pet an animal you aren't sure you like. I would have forgiven it all if not for what happened with the safe. Richard was a man who distrusted banks and trusted metal. We kept our wills and the deed and the silly things that seem holy when you marry, a movie stub, a cork, the paper heart he cut with a butter knife on our first anniversary, in a combination safe in the hall closet. After the rings, I checked the safe every week the way a woman checks her pulse. One afternoon, the knob turned and stuck and turned again, and the door fell open too easily. Inside, the deed sat on top of the will, both slightly crooked as if they had been read by someone impatient. Vertigo isn't just for open heights. It can happen in a hallway with the smell of dust and cedar and your own breath loud in your ears. I called Rita, the river we used to call her because she carried news the way water carries leaves, who had worked as a paralegal before she retired and took up quilting. "Start a binder," she said immediately. "Every strange envelope, every odd phone call, write dates, names, times. If they're helping, it'll prove that. If they're not, it'll prove that too. And call an elder law attorney. Do it before you talk to your son." "That seems dramatic," I said. "So is being moved like furniture," she answered. The attorney's office smelled like copy paper and lemon. Her name was Vance, short, brown glasses, steady eyes. She listened. She asked me to slow down when I rushed. "First," she said, "we lock doors. Put a password at the bank. Revoke any powers of attorney, if any exist. We'll build new ones we can trust. Put your house into a trust with you as the trustee, your friend Rita as successor, not family. Keep your son as an emergency contact if you want, but take away the keys." I signed papers that made me both lighter and older. The trust was a new language, but I was fluent in vows. We changed the locks. We added cameras, 2 in the living room, 1 in the hallway, 1 on the porch, a red dot so small it looked like a misplaced berry seed. Vance taught me the phrase undue influence, and it felt like being given a mirror after months of applying lipstick and a spoon. We wrote letters to my doctors, reminding them that I consented to any sharing of information only in my presence. We contacted the credit bureaus and added a freeze. I practiced saying no with my mouth closed. The first confrontation was not cinematic. It was Tuesday again. My son walked in without knocking and saw the camera in the corner the way you notice a new haircut on someone you used to love. He paused. He smiled. "Good it," he said. "You can never be too careful. Online scams target the elderly. I poured coffee and put his cup on a napkin so I wouldn't have to wash the table afterward. "I'm thinking of selling the house," I said casually, and watched his pupils widen. Hope is a terrible narcotic. It dilates and blinds. "We should talk to a realtor," he blurted, too fast. I stirred sugar into my cup and said, "If I do it, it'll be to someone I trust. I want to stay until I'm ready." He reached for my hand and squeezed. "Of course," he said, "whatever you want." Later that day, I found a realtor's card in the trash with our address written on the back. That night, Lily, my granddaughter, called from her bedroom whispering, "Nana," she said, "is it true we're buying your house?" The word we slid through the phone like cold soup. "Who told you that?" I asked. She hesitated. "Mom says it's grown-up stuff. But Dad called the basement your new apartment, and he said, we'll get the yard and the taxes, and that it's only fair because he's the one who visits." Loyalty at 14 is a burning candle. It drips and scorches, and still you hold it. "Listen to me," I told her. "No one is buying anything. I'm staying in my home until I choose otherwise." She exhaled hard. "Okay," she said. Then so quietly I almost didn't hear it, "They've been fighting a lot. Dad says you're slipping. Mom says she's done begging. I'm sorry." "For what?" "For telling you." "You did the right thing," I said, and for the first time since Richard died, I slept with my fist unclenched. Andrea took control of the next move the way she always did when soft wasn't working. She arranged a dinner, just the three of us, she said, at a restaurant with dark wood and no prices on the menu. The waiter had a matching handkerchief. "We love you," she began, armed with her ombre manicure and the smile that had probably worked on 1,000 transactions. "And love is sometimes about making hard choices. This house is isolating you, the stairs are dangerous, that stove is a hazard. We found a place that would be perfect. Sunroom, book club, tai chi. You'd make friends, real friends, not—" She waved a hand as if she could rearrange my past, like furniture. "Church widows," I supplied, and she had the decency to blush. My son reached across the table and gripped my wrist, not hard, but harder than he needed to. "Mom," he said, "please." The twins at the next table clapped, and I thought about how often sound interferes with truth. "I want to see the numbers," I said. "Show me the fees, show me the contract, show me the loan application you think I won't read." Andrea didn't look at my son. She kept her eyes on me and let the smallest smile float to the surface. "You can't sign, Margaret?" she said brightly. "It's already signed." I felt the restaurant tilt. "By whom?" "By you," she said, and reached into her handbag and put a copy of a form on the table with my name in a hand that looked like mine as much as a photocopy looks like a face. The waiter came, proud with the specials, and I smiled at him the way a woman smiles at a boy with his shirt untucked. "We'll share the salmon," I said. When he left, I slid the form back to her. "You brought me a photocopy," I said. "You should have brought me a lawyer." I did not yell when I got home. I made chamomile tea and sat where the camera could see me and called Vance. "They forged," I said, "and they've forgotten I have a fax machine." Vance met me the next morning at the police station. Detective Nguyen had a tired face and careful eyes. We laid the forms out like a map. We explained the camera. We showed the bank charges I hadn't made, and the credit card I hadn't asked for, and the realtor's card I hadn't contacted. Nguyen took notes, his pen a quiet metronome. "Financial elder abuse," he said eventually. "Coercion. Forgery's the big one. But we need clean evidence of intent." "You'll have it," Vance said. "They're impatient." They tried the medical route next. Andrea called to tell me my follow-up appointment at Mid-City had moved up. "The notary will be there," she added, casual as a shrug. "It's just in case you decide to sign anything medical." Saves time. I dressed in my church suit and pearls and combed my hair the way I used to for parent-teacher conferences. At the clinic, the same young man gave me words and clocks. I recited a poem instead, the one my father taught me that fitted into my mouth like a song. I watched the man falter, then write, then erase. When the notary came in with her kit, I smiled at her as if we were both about to make a delicious mistake. "Could I see your log?" I asked. "I keep a list." She lied too quickly. Vance stepped in from the hall then. She had insisted on coming and introduced herself. The notary left. 30 minutes later, a woman with hair a little too blonde to be kind asked to speak to me alone. "You're taking up clinical time, Mrs. Keating," she said. "If you're here to make a point, you've made it. We have patients who need real help." "So do I answered. Two of them live in my blood. Revenge isn't a plan, it's a posture. It's where you put your feet when someone tries to move you. The day before my birthday, I set the table with my mother's china. I baked the chocolate cake Lily likes and wrote her name in cursive frosting for practice. I stacked the papers they'd brought me, a nest of signatures, initials, dates, threats, on the coffee table. I stopped the wobble by folding a file folder under the leg. I placed the cake knife beside the documents, long and bright and ridiculous. The cane rested against my chair. My ankle ached in the good way, the way that means your body tells the truth. Mrs. Ortiz took Lily to the library after school. Rita sat in her car a block away with a thermos of coffee and a cross-stitch hoop and her phone charged. Vance said not to call her unless someone bled. I said I preferred not to bleed on my carpet. He was early. He wore a new jacket that still had a slight crease in the sleeve where the store had folded it for display. Andrea smelled like grapefruit. They brought cheesecake in a plastic dome. "Let's do this quickly," Andrea said, pushing the papers toward me. "The notary's waiting in the car." I had lit 2 candles, not the numbers, because I had no energy for arithmetic, just 2. Their flames were steady, like faithful people. "Read me the part," I said, "where I stop being a person and become a problem you manage." Andrea laughed, then stopped. My son stared at the pen as if it could write him back into safety. He said the words I used to tuck into him like blankets. "Trust me," and put the pen in my hand. When he knocked the cane away, it didn't hurt. Not the bruise, not the small thud. What hurt was the way Lily flinched in my mind, the way she would hold this memory later like a penny in her fist. The rest, I stood. I told them to leave. They didn't. Andrea took a step toward me, and with her came a smell like battery acid and the sound of someone trying to rehearse a kindness and failing. The red light on the bookshelf recorded. After they left, I dialed Nguyen. I sent the video from my phone. His reply was quick. "Don't be alone," he wrote. "I won't be," I replied, and I wasn't. Rita's car idled at the curb like a patient dog. She came in without asking, took my hand in both of hers, and said, "Okay, now we go bright." Going bright meant letters. Vance drafted and I signed. Revocations of any permissions I had never given. Notices to the bank, to the clinic, to the credit card companies. We filed a police report with the video on a flash drive shaped like a tiny hammer. Nguyen sent an officer to take a statement from Mrs. Ortiz, who had seen Andrea carrying a banker's box from my house last week, said hello, and been ignored as if she were a lamppost. We filed for a temporary protective order. It sounds like something in a museum. Don't touch, but it's really more like locking the pantry from raccoons. For 2 days, nothing happened except quiet. Quiet has a sound when you're waiting. The hum of the fridge, the little crack of the house settling, your own breath reminding you that your body is a machine that won't stop simply because you would like it to. On the 3rd day, the mail brought a postcard from Lily. She had drawn a heart in the corner and a cake with too many candles and 3 words. "I believe you." I put it on the fridge with a magnet in the shape of Ohio. Andrea called on the 5th day from a number I didn't recognize. "You've humiliated us," she said without preamble. "At the clinic." "With the police? People are talking. Do you know what that does to a reputation?" "Yes," I said. And waited. She drew breath like a diver. "We can undo this. Withdraw the report. We'll return anything we borrowed. We'll do a repayment plan. Families handle this privately." I don't know whether it was the "we" or the borrowed that made me smile. No, I said, but thank you for offering me the chance to be the kind of mother you want. I'm not that kind. She hung up so hard I heard her nails scrape the phone. Nguyen called that afternoon. We pulled the notary's log, wait, he said. Yan, it's sloppy. There's an entry with your name you didn't sign. She says she witnessed you at the clinic. There's footage showing she wasn't even in the building. We're going to talk to the D. My heart thudded in a way that remembered the rhythm of dancing. How long does this take, Matyaya? I asked. As long as it takes, he said. But the video helps. And there's something else. We subpoenaed the bank records for that credit card. Purchases match your son's phone location data. He's not subtle. He waited. I'm sorry, he added. I know that isn't the consolation you want. On the contrary, I said, it's the confirmation I needed. The twist came from the safe, not the contents. I had moved those to a safety deposit box, but the bottom, a false panel I didn't know Richard had built. It held a small black notebook with a rubber band around it. The first page had his handwriting, the round O's, the slanted T's, the way he always crossed an F like it was an Irish blessing. He had listed dates and amounts, a ledger, not of our accounts, but of what he had quietly lent our son over the years, car repair, rent, tuition shortfalls, credit card balances, and the repayments that never came. The most recent entries were last year, notated with phrases I recognized from our marriage. This is the last time. Must be the last time. The final entry, a week before he went into the hospital for the last time, read simply, don't make her pay for my softness. Grief is heavy. Shame is heavier. I sat on the hall floor with the notebook in my lap and cried in a way I hadn't allowed myself to since I wore black satin and watched a lid close with all the future trapped inside it. When I finished, I washed my face with cold water, made tea, and called Vance. She came with highlighters and a scanner. This, she said, tapping the final line with her capped pen, is motive. This is history. It makes your case stronger. It makes my heart worse, I said. Both can be true, she replied, which is why I kept her. We set a trap that wasn't a trap so much as a mirror. We invited my son and Andrea to a family mediation at church with Pastor Elaine, who has a voice like a cello and a gaze that saw straight through the mess Richard and I had made in our middle years. They came dressed as if for a job interview, which I suppose it was. Elaine opened with prayer because she believes in good beginnings, even for bad things. We're here, she said, because love makes knots, and we're going to untie them. Andrea rolled her eyes so slightly you might have missed it if you hadn't been a mother who watched faces for a living. We'll make it simple, I said when it was my turn. You have taken things from me. Money, choices, dignity. I have evidence. I have a video of you attempting to coerce me on my birthday. I have a credit card you opened in my name. I have a list of non-consensual changes you made to my accounts. I have a doctor's office willing to say they were approached improperly by you. I have a notary who lied. I have a ledger written by your father that explains the debt you owe, not to me, but to your own integrity. I paused. Here's what happens now. You will return each item we can identify. You will sign an admission of wrongdoing prepared by my attorney. You will agree to a repayment plan under court supervision. You will enter counseling. You will stay away from my house, and you will communicate through counsel only. If you agree, I'll recommend leniency. If you don't, we proceed with criminal charges. Andrea's mouth opened and shut like a window in a draft. My son's face collapsed into something young and ugly. Where did you get the money for an attorney? He asked finally, as if that were the theft that mattered. Savings, I said. The kind of thing mothers do. Elaine glanced at me and then at them, and I could see her holding on to her patience the way a woman holds the last egg in a carton. She's being generous, Elaine said. I advise you to accept this chance. Or what? Andrea said, sharp as glass. Vance stood from the back pew then. She had come at my request in case I needed her, and placed a folder on the table. Or this, she said. Inside was the police report, the bank records, the clinic statement, still warm from the copier. My son reached for the folder. Vance moved it away. You can review it with your own attorney, she said. In the end, they didn't sign. Pride is a cliff some people can't stop walking toward. The next week began with an arrest and ended with a bond hearing. Gwyn called me early. We're picking him up, he said. We'll bring him in without a scene. I made coffee I did not want and sat at the table with my hands folded the way my mother taught me in church. The doorbell rang. It was Mrs. Ortiz with a foil-wrapped plate of empanadas. For strength, she said, and because I like to cook when men are foolish. Andrea posted a photo of their family on social media that night, everyone in matching shirts at a pumpkin patch 2 years ago, and wrote about betrayal, the kind that comes from within. The comments filled with hearts and hands and prayers, and the kind of friend who picks sides without reading. I won't pretend court wasn't terrible. It was fluorescent lights and hard benches and a microphone that made me sound like a stranger. Andrea's lawyer was quick and oily. He questioned my memory, my motives, whether I'd ever been depressed, whether I had asked for help and then punished the helper. I answered each question like a woman counting stitches. Nguyen sat in the back. Vance's hand on my elbow was a small anchor. When the video played, the part where my son knocked my cane away, where he pressed the pen into my hand where I stood, the courtroom went very still. The judge leaned forward as if he could hear our kitchen breathing. That's assault, he said softly, to no one in particular and everyone at once. Andrea cut a deal. Of course she did. She offered emails, she gave the DA texts, timestamps, proof of her calls to the clinic, notes about the notary. She wore a blouse the color of mercy. She said she was protecting her family. She said she hadn't realized the line until she crossed it. She cried without smudging her eyeliner. My son went quiet in the way of men hearing a door lock behind them. He pleaded down to a lesser charge, agreed to restitution, to counseling, to a suspended sentence that would become real if he so much as breathed wrong into my mailbox. The DA called it a win. It didn't feel like one. It felt like being handed back a purse with the cash missing. But the law is only one kind of justice. The rest is housekeeping. I changed the deed, or rather, the trust did. It held the house for me with a clause that said I could live in it until the maple tree fell and the birds stopped coming and the oven forgot its own heat. When I died, it would go to Lily, not because she is my favorite, though she is, but because she believes in truth the way some people believe in vitamins. I rewrote my will with simple words my old English teacher would have admired. I revoked access. I removed names. I added Rita as backup for the trust and also for the hospital because she knows how to say no for other people in a way that makes nurses say thank you. I set up a small fund for the church kitchen in Richard's name so people could eat when it's the last thing in the world they want to do. I also cleaned, not the kind that makes floors gleam, but the kind that makes a mind bright. I returned the mixer. I canceled the cable package I hadn't chosen. I emptied the hallway of the boxes Andrea had packed and used them to carry the things I no longer needed, not because someone else told me to winterize my life, but because I decided to make space. I kept the movie stub, I kept the cork, I kept the paper heart. 2 months later, Andrea left my son. It wasn't because of me, though I was the excuse. He had been sinking long before he tried to use my house as a life raft. She moved to her sister's. My son took an apartment near the highway with blinds that never quite close. He called one night and I let it go to voicemail. His voice was thick. "Mom," he said, and stopped, and the kind of pause that used to move me into fixing things rose up like a reflex. "I'm sorry." He let the words hang, and then, because apologies are cheap when you've run out of money, he added, "I need help." I listened to the message twice. I returned the call the next day at 10 in the morning, the hour when real life happens. "I'll pay for counseling," I told him. "I'll meet you in public every other week for coffee. I'll pray for you. I will not give you money. I will not change my will. I will not sign anything." He said nothing for so long I thought the line had died. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay." Lily came over that weekend with a stack of library books and a video she'd made for a class about oral histories. They want us to interview someone over 65, she said, about a time they had to be brave. You think I was brave? I asked. She rolled her eyes the way teenage girls do when you ask them whether water is wet. Nana, she said, you were like steel, but soft. I laughed so hard I had to sit. She pressed record. Tell me everything, she said. So I did. I told her about the day I met her grandfather at the fair when he won me a stuffed bear with a dart that hit the center of a balloon the color of cherry cough syrup. I told her about the first apartment, the time the bathroom ceiling caved in, the day her father was born, and I thought I had split in half and then looked at his face and understood what glue is. I told her about the early days of our marriage when I thought love was a drama and learned it was a maintenance schedule. I told her about the mistakes we made. I told her about the Tuesday I lost my rings and the Tuesday I found my spine. In spring, the maple flooded the yard with helicopters, and my cane leaned in the corner, gathering dust. Some days I used it, some days I didn't. The point was not the prop, but the posture. I learned Tai Chi with the church widows Andrea had dismissed. We moved slowly, power and tide in return. I found Henry, the handyman whose mother had been in my Bible study, to fix the back step my son had never had time to look at. He whistled while he worked. He asked for coffee, and I told him to get it himself, and he did, and we laughed like cousins. A letter arrived on a Friday from the clinic. It was short and official and said the notary had been dismissed, that their policies had been reviewed and reinforced, that they were committed to ethical standards. There was no apology. I put it in the binder and then in the drawer and then forgot the drawer existed. Some things don't deserve space. One evening, I invited Elaine and Rita and Mrs. Ortiz over for lasagna. We ate at the table where the papers had once sat like snakes. After dessert, Elaine ran her fingers over a scratch in the wood and said, "You should sand this out." "No," I said. I like the history." Rita raised her glass. "To history," she said, "and to women who know how to write it." We clinked and drank and then watched the kind of movie that forgives you for falling asleep. On the mantel, the family photo stood upright again, no faces turned down. If you want a dramatic ending, you won't get it. I didn't walk into a courtroom in a red dress and watch my enemies crumble. No one confessed on the witness stand. No secret checks fell from a false ceiling. Real life is smaller and more precise. The revenge was paper and pixels and patience. It was saying no and meaning it. It was the quiet pleasure of opening a bill with my name on it, paying it, and knowing the number was only between me and the company that sent it. It was seeing my son in a coffee shop on a Tuesday, watching him decide whether to hug me, and letting him stand there, reaching his own conclusion. But there was one last thing, a thing that will satisfy those who believe literature demands a final chord. In late summer, when the leaves began to think about loosening their grip, I went to the jeweler on Maple and 3rd. I took the insurance money from the ring that vanished and a gold pin that had been my aunt's and is in every baby photo of me because she believed pinning luck made it stay. The jeweler was a woman about my age with hands that knew how to measure grief in carats. She designed a band, simple as a vow, and set into it a tiny emerald the color of the maple leaves when they first appear, ridiculous and new. On the inside, she etched 5 words from Richard's ledger, the ones that had cut me and healed me in the same slice. Don't make her pay again. I wear it on my right hand. When I sign things now, the metal makes a small, steady sound against the table. I think of my son every time. I think of the boy he was and the man he is and the man he still might become if the counseling takes and if the part of him that isn't led by fear can learn to lead the parts that are. I think of Andrea sometimes, and I hope her new apartment is quiet and that she someday laughs without hearing the echo of the deals she made with herself to feel safe. I think of Lily and her apple slice mind. I think of the cane leaning in the corner and of the day it clattered against the baseboard and of how I stood and how standing isn't a miracle. It's an action repeated until it looks like grace. When people ask me what I would tell other women, I don't give advice, I give tools. A binder, a cheap camera, a good attorney, a friend who will sit in the car with a thermos and watch your porch light, a pastor who prays with her eyes open, a crafted sentence you practice in the mirror until your mouth knows it without your heart breaking. I'm not refusing help. I'm refusing erasure. I do not know if my son is redeemed. That story belongs to him. Mine ends where it should. At my own front door, keys in my hand, maple leaves spinning like coins in the wind, the porch light warm, a cake cooling on the counter, and a cane precisely where I want it. And if you think that seems small, let me tell you, after the year I've had, it feels like writing an ending with ink no one else can dilute. Which is to say, he tried to turn me into a signature. Instead, with that cane and a stack of paper and a few steady friends, I wrote his end of the story and mine.
My grandma told me this story. I have many more stories. Subscribe so you don't miss the most interesting things.